Hey gang, welcome to an Ozone Late Night Special. In this episode, I am talking Star Trek Picard Season 3, among other things, with the owner and proprietor of Hat Hole Home Video, returning champion, Brian Quarfoth. All right, everybody, welcome to it's kind of a special episode of Late Night because this is a follow-up, and actually my guest is probably the fastest returning champion on the Late Night series so far, coming back to discuss the finale, the ending, and the kind of totality of Star Trek Picard is Brian Quarfoth, the owner and proprietor of Hat Hole Home Video, which you can find over at youtube.com/Hat Hole Home Video. Right? That hasn't changed, correct, Brian? Am I wrong?
Nope, you are correct, sir.
I finally did an intro with no notes. That's only because you were just on, so I had this in memory. Otherwise, it would never have happened that smoothly. So, Brian, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's been a little while, and yet not that long.
Because, not too long.
Yeah. So, we're going to talk about Picard because I think we both were pleased with where it ended up. But before we get to that, I have a very bad habit because I am a rabbit hole type of thinker, and it's very tough for me to keep my brain going on a straight track for any amount of time. I meant when you were on the last episode to ask you about Pack Guy because I don't know what that really is.
Right.
What is that? Explain this to me.
Okay, so there was a time when Beverly Hills 90210 was at the top of the charts, the mid-90s, and...
Oh, it's still top of the charts in my household. My wife watches it every night.
Thank you. I would get along with her very well. I still rewatch 90210. That's a whole other topic.
I must admit,
I go through it maybe every, 5-10 years, something like that. I get the itch, and I start going through it again.
Well, as a casual observer of the show, as opposed to a hardcore fan of it, I am fascinated by Dylan McKay's ability to both be a drug addict and not in the course of seasons. But we could do a whole show on... maybe my wife can come on one time and we could do a whole show on 90210 because honestly, you guys would say more than I would.
I wouldn't be opposed. Any opportunity to talk at length about 90210, I'm always up for.
Even if we didn't
record it.
We will record it because honestly, my backseat commentary would probably be worth it alone as someone who doesn't know enough. At that and Andrea's mystifying attendance of a school and college far below her actual years. But again, let's not start on that or that will be a 2-hour show.
Nope.
So back to Pack Guy, sorry.
But in any case, the 90s, there was a piece of game making software called Click and Play, which was an entirely visual, no programming approach to creating games. And I'm not a programmer, so discovering something like this was really exciting for me. So I got the Click and Play, and I bought a book that kind of explained, some tutorials on how to build your own games. And one of the example games was a Pac-Man type maze game where you collect pellets. And it was a really amazingly innovative piece of software because it was basically just you could create sprites and graphics and set up a bunch of kind of if-then statements, and it was all visual. It was all pictures, and you could say if Pac-Man character hits pellet, destroy pellet, add 10 to score, things like that. It was very straight. It was very simple, very straightforward, but So I made a Pac-Man like game just to make something and called it Pac Guy. And it was, I mean, it was a game built by someone who had no, a teenager that had no concept of game design or game theory or, mechanics, nothing. It was just like raw barfing out a game. But it was filled with, because I started pulling sprites out of Doom and Duke Nukem 3D and started pulling MIDI files, music files out of games, or going online and finding, one of the games I think has that Eye to Eye from a Goofy movie is in it. I just started throwing everything into it because I was just making a Goofy game for myself, and friends started adding onto it, and then we put that out on shareware websites of the day. Again, this is all so foreign to anybody who's like under the age of 40 to this version of the internet. But it was like shareware and freeware sites like Two Cows and SoftSeek and places like that where you could just get free games. Put it out there for free, and it developed a kind of a rabid following at that point, and then a company approached us to sell these games, and by then myself and friends had made quite a few Pac Guy games, and we packaged them together and sold them, and it was for sale at Target and Best Buy. I actually found recently, going through old stuff, it was in a print ad for Best Buy, just randomly, as like a, hey, value, because it was in the budget games section, but it was very popular at the time and has gone on. And it was one of those things where we didn't know any better about copyright. We didn't know any better about all these things we were just stealing, essentially. We assumed that if a publisher was coming to us and asking us if they could sell the game, we assumed they knew best. And at this point, I don't think they ever even like actually played the games or looked at the games, or I don't think they knew anything other than the number of downloads that the games were getting on these websites. But so a lot of people bought these games as kids, or their parents bought them because, oh, it's Pac-Man. I like, it looks like a Pac-Man game, and they bought it because it was cheaper than the real Pac-Man. And so this Pac Guy ended up in a lot of people's homes, and a lot of people ended up having, 20 years later, lots of, even longer, a lot of nostalgia for it, because they remember this like horrible, impossibly cruel and hard game difficulty, because we knew nothing about game balance or gameplay mechanics, nothing. So the game is like brutally, unfairly hard. It's completely obtuse, and it's just one of those things where, but it's filled with references. It's filled with, it's like you start a level and you're like, isn't this a Metallica song, or isn't this like, this is the this is Under the Sea is playing in this, like, so it's filled with all these bizarre references to dig in and pick through and figure out, where did these sprites come from and where did this music come from, and now that people have developed nostalgia for it, now there's this new crop of like people talking about it again, and there's some really very well made either reviews or there's God, what's that one? I think it's called, let me look it up real quick because the guy deserves a shout out, but I think it was called Pac-Man with a Butt Crack or something like that. But a guy did a really long, in-depth documentary, basically, about the Pac Guy franchise. And see if I can find it super fast.
Yeah, I'm looking for it too, because I did see some. So okay, so I may have seen this one. I just don't know because I was looking for it. But you're right. This is what people have to know if you're under a certain age is there was a point where companies didn't know how to search for IP, so they wouldn't be aware of something like this right away. So a publisher could very easily, and probably the publishers as well, didn't know what the legality of things were. There was a period of time where you could, because I used to modify Doom like a million other people.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I am also not a programmer or anything, but I would do the same type of thing where you could replace these very base files. It's not like games are today where you have teams of 100 people or more, multi-million dollars. Originally, these were very simple, relatively. I mean, there was programming, obviously, and I'm not going to make it out like you could just bang out a game in 2 minutes. Some people could if they were geniuses. Most people couldn't. But you could replace one or two things, or there were one or two files that were literally, in the case of Doom, it was just a sprite. And as soon as you took those images, and if you had Photoshop and had access to it or anything that could do image replacement, you could suddenly now have characters. You could replace the sounds. They were typically just WAV files. Their MP3 was non-existent at this point where some of this stuff was happening. You did not have that for a while. So they were just WAV files where you could take a $20 microphone or less and record yourself saying, "Hey, Hitler, you're going to die." And then every time you shot a Nazi or, you fired your gun, go, "Hey, Hitler, you're going to die," and stuff like that. And it was a riot. It was a wonderful time because you could take these games and make them completely personalized, and nobody but you could potentially have a version of this game. It was almost artisanal game making for yourself or your friends. It was a wild time.
Yeah, it really was. I found it. It's called Pac Guy, Pac-Man, but with a human face.
I think that is the one, because I remember something about the human face.
Yep. That's probably the best, most comprehensive explanation of what Pac Guy is and why it has developed. It had a following back in the day, and it's just sort of the following turned into a nostalgic following over the years. And it in some circles it has it is sort of famously it's kind of the room of PC games. It's sort of famously one of the worst but most fun games, most intriguing and entertaining. And it's funny because I've really learned that there is something special about making something so bad on accident that it is completely organic. It's not something that you can manufacture. I hate things that are built to be a so bad it's good thing. I don't think you can ever go into something intending to make it so bad it's good. I think you'll just make something bad.
Well, we just had an example of this because there's a Twitch stream that was called, was it Watch Me Forever or something, whatever it was. I don't remember the original name of it. I can link to it. But essentially it was somebody cobbled together an AI written comedy based on Seinfeld, essentially, with terrible PS1 graphics.
Yep.
And the first version, before unfortunately it started just going crazy because they had accidentally removed the guardrails and suddenly it was becoming transphobic and all the rest of it or whatever, which is inevitably where all this stuff goes when they don't pay attention. But in that first version, I watched it for hours. Yeah. And it was stupid and broken and was not really funny in a traditional way, but it was riveting, and there was something funny about how janky it was. And now they've revised it, and now it is just not the same because now it feels like there is actually some type of intentional badness to it. It does not have that same quality because it was an accident. It was an accident that should not have worked. Room-like type of thing, like you're saying. There is the truly magnificent bad stuff is typically things where it does not function at all like the creator probably intended it to, either in the building of it or the reception of it. It's something where somebody cobbles it together and says, "Oh, this is a fun idea. Nobody's going to care. I'll just put it out there because, a couple people I know think it's funny."
Right.
And suddenly it takes off. And you're right. You almost never... There are very, very, very few examples of that being architected on purpose. 98% of the time, the intentional bad stuff flops. Because
Yes.
there's some X factor to it that you just cannot craft. Whether it's either on the building side, because there were games like this too, where old PS1 games, this era games, where there would be bugs in them that the programmers missed, and they were hysterical. They would cause weird physics reactions, or bad translations from Japan when games were imported is a famous one. A Winner Is You is the classic example. None of that stuff was designed to be funny that way or to be memorable. It was because it was either something that they didn't have time to fix or entirely missed or whatever. And those things have that kind of perpetual life to them where they live on. So.
But that is, and I'll say too, from what I understand, because I, at some point, as other people kind of tried to keep, Astral Entertainment was the company that me and a couple friends formed, with the rise of Pack Guy, and a lot of, at some point, I think I just realized, like, I'm not good at this. So I just said, I think I'm good. I was not built to be a programmer, and Click and Play and the software that came after it, it eventually became Multimedia Fusion, which still exists. And it is still a very cool piece of software, but, it just hit that point where it's like, I'm not a programmer. So I stepped away, and, other people kind of kept making games and tried to still kind of keep those things going. But at some point, it seems like companies upon companies got their hands on this stuff, and from what I've heard, like, completely without the permission of anybody involved, so many other companies were taking the Pack Guy collection and reselling them all over the world, and people, in other countries, it has different names. It's and I can't complain too much, because it's like Pack Guy was filled with stolen material, so I'm not going to complain that somebody stole Pack Guy, but it just
perpetuated.
Perpetuated. I kept wanting to say perpetrated, but that's too negative. It perpetuated sort of continually long after.
Well, you could say it perpetuated via oh crap! What was the word you were using? Perpetrated via perpetuators.
They perpetrated the.
They
perpetuation.
perpetrated perpetuation. There it is. Yes.
Peter Pepperudi's Pet Shop.
Sally sells. I can't do it.
But that it just, to some weird degree, never stopped, and it is. I still often, I think I did finally, like, on Twitter or something. I at some point I said, I got to start talking to the people that still care about Pack Guy, and there's just so many people that still talk about it, and it's so much fun, because very rarely do I see somebody say, like, I bought this and it was garbage and I was mad because I wasted $9. Everybody's like, this thing from my childhood, it's filled with, and this will be a good way to get us on topic, but Pack Guy was always filled with references to Star Trek and Star Wars, specifically, because I was a big fan of both. My friend Garth, who was the kind of the co-perpetrator of Pack Guy, was a huge Star Trek and Star Wars fan, or it still is. But so we were just constantly filling it with those references and characters, and there's not too many other things. The first Pack Guy, at the end, you have a confrontation with characters who are very clearly Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader. The Emperor is thrown down the shaft of the Death Star. The Death Star explodes, and as you leave triumphantly in your spaceship, you are confronted by another ship piloted by a character that is very clearly Khan from Star Trek 2. So it's just this constant barrage of nerd references at that time. But yeah, so it's just one of those things that I don't think will ever fully go away, and people still occasionally pop on my Twitter or wherever and say like, "Oh my God, you made Pack Guy." Like, I loved Pack Guy when I was a kid. It just never goes away.
That has to be pretty neat, though, because
It's
especially as something that was an accidental kind of creation, to have it have a life is.
Yeah. We were just goofing around. We were just making each other laugh and having a good time, and you just never know. You can't plan for lightning to strike, I guess. Like, it just happens.
And that's there's so much of that stuff, and some of that stuff, and some of it is the nostalgia thing, because there is that, like you said, there's people who aren't aware of what shareware even means, because we're so far past what that was. But shareware at the time, there was freeware, shareware, and then there was normal software. I'm generally categorizing. Now, freeware was, I created this thing, I don't ever expect to be paid, take it, do whatever you want. They just throw it out there and don't care. Shareware, in many cases, was literally what it sounds like. You would take this game, play it, think it was great. You would have the ability to buy it or donate to the person in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were expected to spread it to, almost like a chain letter, where you would give it to 10 of your friends, and hopefully those 10 friends pay for it as well, and then a person makes money. I mean, that was what shareware was.
And then you wouldn't receive the curse as long as you did that. Right.
Your eyes would not bleed for 15 minutes every night at 2 a.m., and you would be able to, eat and digest human food. That's the idea of shareware. I'm pretty sure that's what it was created with the intention of. Today, there's an analog in, if you have an app that's free, and then there's a premium version that is sort of it, although in shareware's case, you generally were getting the whole thing unlocked from the beginning, and you could just never pay for it. There was kind of the implicit guilt thing where it's like, okay, you could be paying me for this, that you're enjoying it, but you don't have to.
Well, a lot of shareware too was like, because I had Wolfenstein 3D was, the shareware was just the first batch of levels.
Yep.
And then you could buy the full game, and you'd have 4 times as many levels to play. But if all you needed was those first few levels, and that's the kind of kid I was, like, I could just play that first 5 levels over and over and over again. You'd be good, and you got that for free. It's kind of a wild idea in today's world.
There too, I used to do the same thing where I would only have the first couple levels, but I would keep modding them to change them.
Yeah.
So it was never actually the same 5 levels, because I would change it to, a picture of, I'd make some goofy picture or something like that, and I put a clown in it or whatever. And, that was how you changed it. But it was, there's analogs to it today. Now you have trial versions of software, and it expires like on a PlayStation or whatever. But
right. Or like you said, or you pay to make the game easier to progress, or they're just like freemium and
or
pay
DLCs,
to win games.
Sort of the same thing, although now it's much more, I think, what's the word for it, it's much more malignant of a way of doing it, because now it's it is, let's just squeeze every drop out of everything.
Right. Well, it's all designed to what is Jim Sterling used to always say, the game companies don't want a lot of money.
Of the money.
They want all
the money. Yes, it's exactly what it is.
They hate that you have some amount of money that they didn't get from you. That's
the biggest difference, is shareware was before there were multi-billion-dollar game companies. This was generally small groups of people who were not making a ton of money, and that's why they were asking you to pay. They had created this thing, but there wasn't a whole industry. Now there's industries where these literally companies could release games, a full AAA release, and they would never lose a dime of money, and they still want you to pay for every single thing you could ever do in it. So there is a difference there too. It's a much different environment now.
It is.
But we won't start on that, because that's another 2 hours of just complaining about video games.
Yep.
Something else I just saw you mention, actually, I think today on Twitter, about finding old magazines.
Yeah.
And it's funny timing, because I just recently had picked up, there were 2 sets of magazines. One was called Monsters Attack, which only had 5 issues. I don't know if you've ever even seen it, but it's a great set of magazines, I think from the 90s, or maybe it was early 2000s. Monsters Attack. I think they only made 5 of them. I got those off eBay because I love those magazines. They were like Universal Monster type of stuff. Yeah, Monsters Attack was how many issues? 5, I think. Yeah. Oh God, this is such a wild
you know
magazine.
what?
Yeah.
In the same box of what I posted pictures of on Twitter today, I have the Monsters Attack with the sepia tone Frankenstein.
Yes.
Frankenstein's monster.
Yep.
Sorry, everybody.
That's fine.
But that issue, I have that issue from my childhood. I've never seen another issue, but that issue I read hundreds of times as a kid. It's like just such an entertaining magazine with like serious stories being told. Like there's like wacky I'm trying to think, they take stills from old monster movies and just add like funny speech bubbles onto them. There's like kind of every form and every way that they could entertain you with like that subject matter. It's sophisticated, but then it's also like very lowbrow and silly, like just from one page to the next. It's a great magazine.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I know somebody who looks back at me in the mirror who's digitizing all 5 issues and is planning to provide them to friends. But if I can get in contact with that person, I will see if I can get those to you, because
that'd be great.
Yeah, that was the whole reason this person wanted to get the physical editions, was to be able to scan them because they're impossible to find and they are wildly entertaining. The one I always remember is I don't think this was I don't know, was this in that issue? Was it the one with the lumberjack who has the alien under his beard? Is that same issue?
Not that I recall. I don't think so.
That's the one I remember. I read the 2 stories from those mags that I remember are the one where the guy creates the golem, which is kind of just another modern retelling. And I think Brian Boland, who's a great comic book artist, did the artwork for it, which is part of the reason. The artwork is amazing on that one. Mm-hmm. And this guy creates a golem, and it's just a retelling of the golem story. The idea of creating this, for anybody who doesn't know, a golem is a Jewish creature that is created and historically tends to go out of control because it cannot discern between, it's created to fight persecutors of the Jews, but then it kind of Frankenstein's monster style cannot really judge what it's doing and starts to just start destroying everything, and then they have to stop it. Yeah. And this is a similar telling of that story. It's the only reason I know the Hebrew words for life and death is from that story, because they pointed out. And I'm like, I can write in Hebrew. I know the words for life and death. It's the only Hebrew I know, but I know it burned into my young brain from this story. And then the other one is about this lumberjack, who's this weird lumberjack up in the Canadian forest, and nobody gets him. He's almost like, if you imagine Jesse Ventura, but even angrier. He's that type of big burly character. And people see him doing weird things, like they'll give him pancakes and maple syrup, and he'll take the pancakes off and dip his beard in the syrup, and it soaks it up, and they can't figure out what it's doing. And then at the very end, after all these people have been murdered, and the character's name is Weird Beard, that's what they call him, he corners a guy and puts him up against the wall against his throat and lifts his head up, and under his beard is this like eyeball stalked thing-looking alien, and that's what lives under the beard, and that's what's eating things. And so he's killing people and drinking their blood. It is wild. I mean, and that's the whole magazine has stuff like that. So that's the one. And then the other one is a magazine called Cartoons, and the CAR would be would be in big letters and then tunes. And it was, and I'm not necessarily a big car culture guy, but I kind of was because my dad was. So it was kind of a by proxy thing, but it was the same kind of idea. It was all these wacky cartoons and illustrations based around stories that had to do with cars. And I think it started in the 70s. I wasn't alive in 1970 or anything like that, so I wasn't reading it from the beginning. But it was. I remember them being around all the time, and there was all these wild illustrations. People who were from car, like Coop and oh God, what was the guy? The Ratfink guy, whatever his name was.
I think his name is Rat. I think his name is just Ratfink. I think
that could be. And so they were doing all these wild stories, and it was. I always have admired people. I can't draw cars for anything. I can draw a lot of things. I can't draw cars, at least not cars that look good. And these people can draw cars. And I mean, blown out, weird caricature versions of cars. I am such a admirer of people who can do weirdly proportioned actual mechanical things, whether it's, you know, cutaway drawings, you know, because you used to see that with like mask cars, you know, and they'd have a cutaway where they'd show how does the car function, how does the car door come up and become a wing, and you'd have all these technical drawings for it, which is, you know, it's all nonsense. They're making it up. It doesn't explain anything. There are no cars that can fly with gull wing doors that I'm aware of, but there's probably some billionaires probably got one, but there aren't many of them.
Yeah.
And so it was all just made up stuff, but I've always been like, wow, I don't have the mind for that. You know, I can draw some things out of imagination, but I cannot lay out a car in a way that could be convincing to a person. So cartoons had a ton of that stuff. So that's
they look
one.
I'm just looking at the covers. They look amazing from
They're
back in
wild.
the day.
Yeah, they're great. And again, it's from the time period that, you know, I think you and I like, which is kind of, it was big in the 80s and, you know, went into the 90s. I think they just relaunched it. I haven't looked at any of the new stuff, but those are impossible to find, at least for me, unless you want to pay a ton of money.
Right.
But that's another one where I was just thinking, like, yeah, I think I have one cartoons. I don't even remember what number it is. I'd have to go find it and look at it. That I've had forever. I mean, it's yellow as hell, and it's, you know, I don't even want to touch it or I'll just destroy it. But you know, but that's great. I miss magazines. I know nobody likes magazines anymore. They're, you know, our thing, but
well, I mean, as with many things, I think it's not even that. When I look at old magazines, and I do have a lot of, you know, back in the day when I could get, you know, a Nintendo Power or a Game Pro or a Electronics Gaming Monthly or whatever, you know, whatever I could get my hands on back in the day to just, like, you know, because I loved movies and TV and video games, and when I was a kid, that's really like when you get into it, it's like kids with Pokemon now, because I'm a boomer, so I'm going to talk about kids and their Pokemon and their TikToks right now. But when they are into Pokemon, that's kind of all they care about. So if they want to read a book, they want to read a Pokemon book, or if they want to read a magazine, they want to be absorbing Pokemon in whatever they're doing, video game, TV, print, like whatever it is, they want that thing. So when I was a kid, I was the same way. I wanted, you know, I liked my movies, my TV, and my video games, and if I was going to read a magazine, I wanted it to be about those same things, which is what, like Mad Magazine, and those things were perfect because they were all, you know, lampooning all the things that I was watching and absorbing at the time. But I was going to say, like, when I do look at something now, you know, Game Informer or something like that, something that's being produced right now, there is just not the heart and soul in it like there was back in the day. And I don't know if that's just like the algorithm has sort of taken over everything, and just everything is designed to be as bland and broad appealing as it possibly can be. But I feel like when I go back and look at things in the, you know, magazines in the 90s, things like that, they feel more like they have, it's a voice of a specific person, and everything feels a little bit more like fly by the seat of your pants, and you feel it. So I don't know if that's, maybe if things went back to a little bit more of that attitude, kids now or young people now, there would be like that same, you know, love and resurgence of these things, or if it would just continue to die out because it's not on an iPad. I don't know.
If I had to guess, I mean, I think there's a couple of things, and I have no insight besides, you know, what I observe in the world. So I don't know anybody in publishing or anything like that, but just from stuff I see, because I follow a lot of artists and illustrators on Twitter, so I get some sense of how things have changed. And I think some of it is because there just isn't the money in it. That's part of it. So part of the reason it doesn't feel like there's that much effort is because it is perceived as a low income sector. People don't buy magazines. I mean, they fold just like newspapers. Everything is it's all consolidating and folding, and the consolidation is the other end. Is cartoons and even Mad and Cracked and all these, if you look at them when they started to where they are now, They started, I think in most cases, as a very small group of people who were they didn't worry about what the profit share was. They didn't have a board to answer to. They weren't worried about maximizing vertical integration across different segments of your market. All this type of stuff was not thought of. It was, we just want to cut the Pack Guy. It's the Pack Guy thing, except in a magazine form, where it was like, you know what, this is funny. And nobody else is doing anything like this. So let's just do it. And let's, because you used to be able, I mean, you still can technically, but zines as an art form were huge in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. All the underground artists that now most people don't even know, but like Crumb and all the rest of them, they were putting out all these, because I've collected a lot of this stuff. This is all weird outsider underground stuff that, nobody really cared if anybody but the people like them saw it. And there is the core problem. No company wants to hear that only 4% of the market they're going to cares. Even if the 4% cares more passionately and will spend more money than you can imagine, that's not what they want. They want a shotgun approach. Yeah. It's the same thing as video games. I don't want some of the market. I want all of the market. If you're not delivering that, then you're done. I mean, it's the same thing as video games that are often seen as failures because they only sold 4 million copies instead of 5 because the projection was 5. Not that 4 million is well, to them it is a bad number, even though to me it's like if 4 million people bought anything of mine for even $1, I'm very happy. Thank you very much. Let me try to recreate even a half of that next year, type of stuff. But that's not enough for these people. So it's the same idea, is that everything has become consolidated down, and most magazines and TV stations and radio stations are owned by a very small amount of companies. And their concern is lowest common denominator, mass market appeal. Say nothing, do nothing, show nothing that can possibly lose us 0.25% of the market. And you're just never going to get a very passionate, any artist that has to function in that environment is not really going to care about what they're putting out. That's just a reality. You don't care if you feel like the person that is paying you doesn't care. Why would you care if no one else does? I know people will say, well, the work itself is the reward. And I'm like, okay, that only works for a while. That stops working when you actively feel apathy to everything you're putting out there.
Yeah.
It just doesn't survive. So
well, it works when you are young and passionate. And then at some point it's like you'll allow yourself to be taken advantage of, because essentially you're just, that passion lets you, it allows you to let yourself be taken advantage of from a business standpoint.
Yes.
And at some point you just say, well, I am worth more than this, and I was willing to do it for a while because I love it, but at some point I have to pay my bills.
Yeah, if somebody came to you tomorrow and said, I will give you enough money to live on for 5 years, and all I want you to do is the Hat Hole video channel, then I think that channel would be something you would do all the time, and you would be able to have all kinds of, if you didn't have to worry about it, if you could literally do whatever you wanted, you would experiment in ways that you probably don't on an ordinary basis, because not that you couldn't do it, but you'd be able to do it all the time. That freedom changes the way that you approach what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not that that's necessarily, because there's another side to that, which is when you have absolutely no restrictions, then you become George Lucas in the prequels, which I don't know if that's really a good thing. So there is a benefit to having some boundaries to what you're doing. But when you feel like you can just be expressive, and there's nobody that's either going to say, yeah, nobody cares actively, because I don't think art has to have an audience necessarily. I don't think that's a requirement. But if there's a proactive non-interest, that will sap your creative juices. It just does. If you feel like there is an active disinterest, whereas if you feel like you have a blank canvas and you can really do whatever you want, then you can do weird stuff. But you're right. You have to pay bills at some point. I think for these people, the modern version of cartoons is probably being done with a very small budget, with a very specific, I would guarantee, and I know nothing, but I'm guaranteeing you now, I don't know that this is true. I just know that it's a fact, or whatever Bill Maher used to say, whatever that phrase he used was, which I always thought was a good one. I don't know this for a fact. I just know it's true. I think that's how it went. The new version has a set of guidelines on what they can do. The old version probably had one. Just publish it occasionally. Bang, done.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yep. I don't disagree.
Well, now that we've blown 40 minutes talking about non-Star Trek stuff, which is fine because I really don't care, let's actually talk about Star Trek Picard, because when we did our last episode, the 7th episode had just aired, and I think you had seen it, but I had not.
That's correct. Yep.
And that was the one where Vatic had explained. So as a catch-up for people who may not have watched, well, if you haven't watched it, we're going to be spoiling it, so I'll just warn you now. We're not going to dance around what's going on.
No, and you've had plenty of time. We're not doing this the day after, so.
Right, and it's not like it hasn't gotten good reception to make you think, oh, I should go watch this. You've had time.
Yeah.
So at this point, we had a lot of the first. RLM said that essentially the first 4 episodes were a movie, which I think we agreed with, that this is really set up almost as a 2 or 3 movies in one series is really what this feels like it was, which was kind of the discovery by Picard that he has a son. That's kind of the initial opening, is Picard reunites with Crusher, finds out that they actually had a son after their many failed relationships. And we're very clearly starting to get the idea that there's something wrong with the son. Or that there's something's going on with the son. Riker's back with them as well as what's his face. Worf is running around with Raffi from the earlier episodes, doing secret Star Trek Federation intelligence work. Then this big evil-looking ship that somehow has a giant loud horn that plays the scary-sounding sound from the first Star Trek movie, shows up, headed by Amanda Plummer, who is after Picard's son. She is aided by some bird people, or bird-masked people, which I don't think we ever really got an explanation for.
No, as far as I know, they are just all the changelings, but they never say. But I'm pretty sure they do. We saw them change form. But the bird masks, like why they look the way they do, there was never an explanation.
I mean, I like to think it's an homage to Argento films or whatever. That's fine. That somebody was just a really big fan of Italian or, Phantom of the Paradise type stuff. Fine. I don't need an explanation for everything. I'm just going to run with that, because otherwise the show never provides a reason.
Well, I think when we see like the revelations of mysteries as a whole in this season, the only thing I can really think is that they probably did it because they were trying so hard to not let people guess any of the reveals, that I think they were just like, let's do something like, if we did anything that even 1% hinted at changeling too soon, like, people will guess it. If we tip our hand at all, they'll guess it. So let's have them be swamp birds, and nobody will guess. That's what it feels like.
Sure. It's just as valid an explanation as any. What I thought at the end was, well, the easiest way you could have done that was to show that these were also people who were experimented on by the Federation and were locked into a solid shape. They could, you know what I actually wish they had done, and some people will think this is corny, maybe, and maybe it is. Maybe it's just me liking to think I'm clever when I'm really not. But what I would have loved is if they had done a kind of callback to the Twilight Zone, where they took the masks off and they were beautiful people, but stuck as solids, and it would almost be, the episode where the woman is beautiful after she takes the wrappings off, and you find out that everybody else looks weird. And it could have been like a very subtle nod to that, where they felt like they were completely deformed because they were stuck as solids, and they were all Fifth Element-esque models, beautiful individuals.
Well, they would. I mean, they would hate. A changeling would hate never being able to change. Like that would be hell. Like no matter what they looked like, that would be their biggest hell.
Yes. So that would have been, I would have loved that, but that's just me, like I said. So we do find out that the changelings and the Borg are working together, and that there has been an infiltration of the transporter systems of the Federation that affect only people that are under age 25 because of some, I don't remember the exact reason. There's some biological reason. And
yes,
so everybody who has used a transport, do you remember what it was? There's some alteration of DNA that locks in after 25 or something like that. Was that what it was?
Yeah. It was something like, it was some science nonsense that was just like, once you hit this age, like it can't this change to your DNA can't take effect.
Right. And so that causes everybody who's younger, including at this point, the Next Generation crew is basically all together again. So we've got everybody, including Data, who is now 4 Datas in one, or 4 androids in one, except only really 2 because we don't care about the other 2, but we just mentioned them because they've been mentioned before. And so they've got him because he was the security system for the Federation's secret black site, which seems like an awfully non-redundant security system, but the show is not concerned with that. And so at this point, we find out that, I'm just saying, they took him out, no security system. So if anybody was sitting by anybody who's a genius Ocean's 11 type is like, okay, the changelings and the Borg have just destroyed the defense system. Let's go rob everything while they're busy with that, stuff they're dealing with.
Well,
which would
also
be a great side story.
They could have only just have installed this new data as the security system, like in the last maybe year or 2. So what was the security system before him?
Yeah. No, I assume it was swipe cards. That was it.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a badge? You're good. So shame that the changelings and the Borg didn't think of this 2 years earlier.
Yeah.
But regardless, what this all does is get us to have the Next Gen crew back together after Data and Lore have this wonderful mind battle, which is actually one of my favorite moments of the whole show. So we'll cover this stuff in detail. I'm just blowing through it to get to the end.
Yep.
And then have to confront ultimately the Borg, because the changelings basically get kicked aside like I don't know, whatever. They're out of it almost as fast as they're in it, even though they've been set up as a big threat. And ultimately what this comes down to is a somewhat replay of Star Trek First Contact, where now the Queen is going after Picard's son, and Picard goes into the heart of a Borg cube that's built into Jupiter, right? Jupiter. I think it was Jupiter.
Yep. Yeah, it was in this. Wasn't it in the storm?
It was in the eye of the storm, which is one of the raddest things this show ever did. But before we get into the detail work, and so Picard goes in, hugs his son really tight, and the son wakes up and says, yeah, this is stupid. They bail, blow up the cube, and they then set up that there is now going to be probably a spin-off show where 7 of 9 and some of the crew that were on the Titan, which is now the Enterprise again, will take off for new adventures, and Picard and the rest of them have a drink, play cards, and try to make us forget, rather successfully, the 2 Picard seasons that came before. And that is the amazing victory that is Star Trek Picard Season 3. It makes you forget 1 and 2 even existed, by not only omission, but by a level of quality that honestly I am stunned that this show managed to achieve.
Yes, I think obviously the 2-part finale is where, I mean, kind of everything goes supernova. Nostalgia and quality and storytelling, everything is leading to that 2-part finale. And I don't have a lot of bad things to say. I have nitpicks because I am a Star Trek nerd, and nitpicks are our fuel. But beyond that, I won't say I forgive Picard season 1 and 2. I think Picard as a series is still a terrible series that pulls itself out of a nosedive at the very end. And I almost, it's one of those things where I almost want to just erase all of it and treat especially the 2-part finale as like just this television event that, some special thing that they did. But with just an 8-episode preamble to bring us up to speed for that 2-part finale.
Well, I will say, because this show, I believe, the third season, this particular season, was run by different people than the first two were. Specifically,
it was, yes.
Akiva Goldsman did not write episodes for this one, from what I'm seeing on IMDb. And also, what is the name of the person? Was it, what was that guy's name? Oh, Terry Matalas.
Yes.
I think is the person who was the showrunner for this season. So the fact that there was such a change.
Terry wrote, and I don't know if he directed, but he wrote the 2-part finale specifically.
Okay. But also, I think, was the showrunner. I believe he was put in charge of the show.
Yep.
So the fact that there was such a difference in this, forgive is the wrong word. I am happy to discard the first two and rely on the people who did this to possibly carry this forward, because there is such a massive difference. I mean, almost unbelievable, to the point where it literally feels like they sat in a room and somebody said, okay, we've had 2 cracks at doing something that we thought was a good idea, and no one wants this. We're going to have to go back to what we know works, and you guys, whoever the showrunners were, you cannot run it because you don't get it. We need somebody who understands it. And this person said, I bet you I can do it. And he did. And so I'm all behind him for now. It's kind of like my approach to most things. I am loyal to something until it decides to smack me in the face and shove my lower regions into a sausage making machine. Up until that point, I stick with what is working for me. Yeah. So this is the reverse. I'm bailing on what didn't, and I'm fine with the guy who seems to know what he's doing and actually would like to see what he does with a full show, like Star Trek Legacy is the name they keep banding about.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what this person does, because he understands what for most people is the best, quote unquote, version of Trek work. He managed to recreate a lot of that, not perfectly. Like you said, there's nitpicks all over the place. And things that seem like they were strangely absent. For example, they said Janeway's name so many times that I don't know how she wasn't. The only thing I can think, pure conjecture, I know nothing about anything, I always like to preface that so there's no assumption of insider info, is that they did plan to have her and had to sub in Tuvok, because otherwise it is baffling how much they invoke Janeway to not even show her as a hologram at all. Right? That's strange, isn't it?
No, I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked and I know there have been times, if you search YouTube, you can find times where at Star Trek conventions, Jerry Ryan or someone else would say that working with Kate Mulgrew was challenging, and maybe not everybody got along. Not every TV show set can be the set of Next Gen where everybody is genuinely friends and has stayed friends to this day. So I don't know if maybe they thought they could get her and then she found out she'd have to do a scene with Jerry Ryan and just kind of said, I'm good. Like, I don't know. It's very weird. It feels like they were prepping us the whole season for Janeway, and then it just never happens. I like the scenes with Tuvok. I was happy to have Tim Russ back.
Oh yeah, he's great. There's absolutely not to be read as a complaint about him. I like Tuvok a lot, so I'm fine. Honestly, I don't dislike anybody from Voyager. So if any of them had showed up, even Harry Kim, who I know everybody likes to whine about Harry Kim, yes, they didn't do anything with him. I like the actor fine. So anybody from Voyager could have shown up, and I would have been fine with it. But the show sure tries to lead you in the direction of Janeway is going to show up with Voyager for some reason, maybe because it had bio whatevers in its nacelles or who knows what, and it had to interface with the Borg cube because it's also bio whatever, and then it just vaporizes. Well, and they never
that's a good point too. Is they were setting up Janeway, and we were expecting Janeway even before the Borg reveal, and then once the Borg is revealed, it makes even more sense for Janeway to show up with Voyager, because Voyager is kitted out with anti-Borg technology, presumably still from the Voyager finale. So it is weird. There's clearly maybe some, I shouldn't say clearly, but it feels like there were definitely pieces of the puzzle that maybe they were trying to get in place that they couldn't. I don't know.
Yeah, because the other thing I was, the two things I expected to happen, because I thought I kind of had this thing figured out at the end, and I had nothing figured out because, and this will sound like a complaint, it's really not a complaint, it's more of a, oh, okay. I mean, at this point, once you get to the last two parts, honestly, I don't care. I'm on board with the, as you said, the clear love between these actors and in these characters and all the rest of it supersedes everything. Honestly, it doesn't even matter what the ending is, as long as thankfully nobody died, which is great, because I was sure they were setting up Worf to die, which would be the only character I would have been okay with. Not happy, but okay, because that is Worf's kind of thing. Right. Worf has always been like, hey man, dying in battle, saving people for a good cause, I'm good, whatever. And that's sort of what you feel like he's come to terms with his life, and he's at peace and centered, and that's to set up the death where he says, I don't have any anger left. I've accepted it. I've come the full circle of the warrior. I have lived a full life of a Klingon, and to die in saving my friends is the greatest honor one can. I mean, you almost can write the speech in your head where it's there.
Yeah.
So but they didn't even do that. Nope, everybody makes it. The only thing I was kind of like when they made it the Borg, I went, oh, we're doing the Borg again? And I know people will say, and I'm not even disputing this. This is not even a, no, you're wrong, or angry retort to it, is people will say, well, it's Next Gen. Next Gen was defined by the Borg. Therefore, it has to be the Borg, because this is a show that is essentially echoing what came before. So, of course, it's the Borg. Whereas the Changelings were more of a Deep Space Nine enemy. And that's not an incorrect perspective to have, and I don't even necessarily disagree with it. But I would have liked to see them stretch the Next Gen crew a little bit to the Changelings, because it's not like Trek does not have the precedent to take a villain of the former series and recontextualize it in a new way. So the original series had the Romulans. Next Gen basically brought them back and made them interesting. Then Deep Space Nine took the Romulans and moved them into another interesting avenue where now they were allies, even though they retained their, duplicitous and very technical way of looking at things, and their never failing ability to spot a faked piece of evidence. Don't forget that. So
it's a fake.
It's a fake. You could have taken the Changelings and had the Next Gen crew. And there is even this part where they acknowledge that some of them don't know. Like 7 of 9 says, I don't know anything about the Changelings. We never faced. We know what they are, but we don't really know them. We don't know them like the Deep Space Nine people. So I thought maybe the Defiant was going to show up. I went, oh, wait, you know what? Maybe it won't be the Voyager. Maybe it's going to be Worf on the Defiant and he'll get blown up. Kind of what almost happened in First Contact, right? He shows up and you think, uh-oh, Worf's in trouble. Of course, they got him out there too. So I was kind of surprised that they just stuck. And then, like I said, once the Borg came in, the Changelings felt like an afterthought. They were just kind of there, and that's it, and then gone. That
is... When we talk about, we will turn our backs on seasons 1 and 2 and just completely ignore anything that happens in those seasons. Season 3, when we talk about it, we're either talking about the season as a whole, or we're talking about the finale. And when you talk about the finale, I feel like we're talking, 9 out of 10. Like it was just a home run. But when you're talking about the season as a whole, I knock big points off because the villains that we had for 8 of 10 episodes turn out to not matter at all. And that is a huge storytelling misstep. If I told you a story about a guy named Bill and this crazy day that he had, and then at the very end of the story, I said, we'll never forget Bill. There's this other guy, Steve, and really the story's about Steve. It's like, you'd be like, well, why did you tell me all this stuff about Bill? And that's how I kind of feel about the Changelings. I think the reveal that the Borg were sort of the big bad behind the changelings, you could have kept a partnership between the two, and even set up that it was like a partnership, but then at the end the Borg double cross the changelings and discard them. They don't need them anymore. And the changeling, it's like you could have that kind of a moment, but to just basically be like, Vadic shatters and we just don't talk about changelings anymore, was kind of lame.
Except for a mention, a very small aside, that Crusher came up with a way to get rid of them from transporters and they could never do it again, which, saying they could never do it again is like saying that because you installed antivirus on your computer, you'll never get a virus again because it recognizes all current viruses. That's not how it works. They'll figure another way out. So that was bizarre, because that was, and I think we talked about this in the last one, it would logically make sense that the Borg would say, okay, we'll work with you, get what they needed, and then immediately assimilate them, or, virus them the same way that essentially the Federation did. I mean, they're not stupid. They're going to figure out, well, biologicals they're vulnerable to viruses in a way that we are not. So, that's...
Well, and you know what I was thinking today while I was kind of getting in the headspace for talking about this? I realized, what would have been really cool is if the Borg partnership had been revealed and they were in a position, because Vadic would become like the sort of the second in command, the second in command in a movie or a video game or whatever. It's like the second in command is always like the more interesting, tougher fight that you have to get through them to get to the main villain. And if they had set Vadic up and, just her changeling powers alone, she was sort of being defeated, and then the Borg Queen infused her with Borg nanites, and then then Vadic morphed in front of Picard and crew into like a changeling Borg thing. And I don't even know what that would look like, but I got to imagine some conceptual artists out there would have a field day with, well, what do you do with like when Borgs infect something that can shapeshift? Like, you could make something incredibly cool, and she could almost turn into some kind of, I don't know, a monster, like a Borg that could change shape and size, and you could have had a really wild fight, something that Star Trek fans have never seen before. And I think that would have been, and then, then she would be defeated somehow, and that would have been much more satisfying. And I don't know.
Well, there again, the show almost seems to set that up, because the Borg Queen, when we finally get to her, is immobile. She looks like Overdog from that terrible 80s movie, whatever, Space Hunter.
Oh,
she
that's
looks
right.
like,
yes.
That's what I thought of as soon as I saw her. I'm like, oh, she's immobile. So then having Vadic as her, heavy, that logically makes sense, because the Queen can't do anything, and all of her drones are basically rotting. I mean, they're sort of moving, but they're zombies effectively, right? So again, it's weird that they never went anywhere with that and just broke her against the hull of her own ship, which, don't get me wrong, it's great to shatter your enemy against the hull of her own ship, but it does seem like a missed opportunity.
But that is where, that's like the end of the series and the beginning of this finale movie.
Right.
And in some ways it feels like maybe they just wanted to sort of wipe the story slate a little more clean as they went into that finale or something. But I think it hurts the series overall. It doesn't really hurt the finale that much.
No, I feel like the perception was, again, this is me probably thinking I'm smarter than I'm not, but I feel like maybe the thinking was, okay, Vadic, we as you said, they want to hold the big Borg stuff to the end. They want that impact of that super finale, which works. So they want to hold as much of that off, but they know they can't have there's no Borg cubes floating around. We have to have some kind of enemy. So, okay, the changelings and this giant ship that looks like it's, made to be evil itself and should just be alive, and just some kind of living evil ship, like an evil Farscape version of Moya or whatever. we have to have that because we have to be able to have them on the run, and we have to recreate the comm thing in the nebula. So we can't do that with the Borg because the Borg wouldn't be so stupid as to fall for two-dimensional thinking. They would have sensors that would, okay, so we can't use them. What are we going to do? Well, they're partners with the changelings, right? So can we make it that there were bad Federation scientists and this woman, and I like the thing is she takes the form of who tortured. Like, that's great. All that pathos is fantastic.
Yep.
So this is not Amanda Plummer's fault. This is a poor resolution of what could have been a great villain and was a good villain for a while. Her performance, everything was good.
Yep.
And then somebody must have said, well, okay, so, and maybe they thought, all right, so the final confrontation, we're going to have some of them inside the cube, and that's the Borg Queen stuff with the sun, and then let's have the rest of them fighting Vadic and the controlled people who are going after Earth. I don't know. If we have Vadic survive till the end, it kind of takes away the intimacy and the weight of the Picard confrontation. I want everybody to be focused on that. Oh, so what do we do? Well, let's just kill her. Let's have her say everything she needs to in episode 8, and then we'll take her and we'll throw her out into space, and she'll get really cold, and then she'll break, and we can let her swear and say fucking solids, and that's great, and that's it. And everybody like, yay, fucking solids, and then we can move on to the finale, and we can just keep everything on the Borg and Picard because everybody likes First Contact. They don't like the other one so much, so we need to recreate that. Like, that feels like the thinking that's going on with this.
Yeah, I agree.
So I agree with you that the series is weaker than the finale. Although I think the first 2 episodes are very strong too. The setup episodes are good, and then the middle is kind of where it goes and starts to creak a bit.
Yeah, I actually, because I think when we talked about episode 7, and you hadn't seen it yet, but I still think 7 is a high point. 7 is an emotional episode, and everything's kind of popping off. That's when Lore is mostly in control of the new data body, and there's so much going on. It's so fun, and it's almost like so little happens in that episode, but it's just really tight and engaging. And then episode 8 is where Amanda Plummer gets everything out. Vadic gets... We see Vadic be more evil than we've ever seen her. She, like, really gets to chew it up. And then it's all thrown out the window. And I looked, and I consider episode 7, outside the finale, I think episode 7 is probably the best episode. I looked, it's tied for being the lowest rated episode on IMDb. And episode 8, I think, is maybe the worst episode because of these bad storytelling elements. And episode 8 is one of the highest rated episodes. So I feel like maybe I'm just not in it for the same thing that the most of the audience is in it for, maybe. But it feels like these are sort of somewhat divisive stances on some of these issues, these storytelling issues.
Well, this does tie in somewhat to one of the things that I because you and I are both fans of Red Letter Media. We both, I think, like them. I don't necessarily agree with their Star Trek perspectives. They are extraordinarily retrograde in the way they think Trek should be, to a point where I'm like, okay, you have to allow series and characters to evolve. It cannot just be repetition. So that's where I think there is there is friction. So there is stuff I agree with them on where you're rubbing into this difference between, and this is somewhat, I think, still the way that Paramount or whoever perceives the Abrams reboot, which was actiony. And it was lots of blasting, lots of running, lots of yelling, sexy Mac bridge type stuff.
Yeah.
And that worked for a while till it didn't. Which was the second movie, which is probably
which was one movie later.
One movie later, although Beyond was certainly better than 2.
Yeah, I like Beyond a lot, actually.
Yeah. So that was, again, where almost like this, where there was a reset. They went, oh, wait a minute. Okay, there's stuff we can't do. So I think there is there is some middle ground between New Trek, which is Discovery as well, is in that mold of actiony, and quip and running around, which is not necessarily, I don't write it off the way some purists, old school purists do. Do I think it dips too far into that? Sure, because there is one of the strengths, I think, of Next Gen and Deep Space Nine, which are my favorites of the whole thing. and I still like Voyager. I like bits of Enterprise, that type of stuff, is that you would get a nice ebb and flow to the way that these series would unfold. So you would have episodes that were literally nothing but people talking in a room. That's the whole thing. And as somebody who has a Criterion Collection version of My Dinner with Andre less than 10 feet from me, I can handle that. But I also have Mad Max Fury Road maybe 2 feet from that title because they're both M's and my stuff's alphabetical. So, you know what? I have them in the wrong order. Y comes after it. I have to fix that later.
God.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, it's this good. This episode has provided a thing I have to fix. So there is a balance that has to be struck. And I think that's where some of the impulses of Picard, especially in season 1 and 2, buck up against what people loved about Next Gen. And I think that's the biggest problem with it, is they took the most loved character from one of the most loved series who was not known for being a runaround action person. They tried to inject too much of a modern science fiction angle to it, along with other problems. And this show stepped back a little bit, and you barely saw. They were never on Earth, at least for more than flashback or whatever. There was never somebody on the ground. They were always in the ship, as Next Gen was. Even the pew 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 space battles were largely held back until the finale had the big lasers everywhere thing, which did get a little bit of saturated overload.
Yeah,
but it was minimal. It was quick. It was over pretty fast, so it was all right. And then the Titan doing the cloaking, non-cloaking thing, that was great. I liked that.
Yeah, I liked that a lot.
I dug the hell out of that, so that was fine.
I'll tell you. I mean, this one thing that I disagree with is I disagree with rechristening the Titan as the Enterprise, because we, as the viewers, we just went on a hell of an adventure on the Titan, and we bonded with the Titan. And at the end, I was like, I love the Titan as a ship now. And when they renamed it the Enterprise, I felt like, well, you sort of stole. It's almost like stolen valor. It's like, does every ship that does great things have to be named the Enterprise? Can't it just be the Titan did these great things? So why it earned its name? So let it keep its name. Let it keep the name that it had while it did all of these great things. While it fought against the entire fleet. I do kind of think that was, I don't know, in a weird way, disrespectful to the Titan a little bit.
I'll tell you what I feel like that comes from. And again, this is spitballing, but this feels like so that they're in the future, and a year from now, there can be a promo where Legacy and Strange New Worlds are on at the same time, and they can say the past of the Enterprise and the future of the Enterprise on one streaming channel for only $5.99 a month. Paramount Plus. Boom. And that's a total studio note. That's a total thing, because one of the things that I always talk about that I think is the best thing about Deep Space Nine is it has, 3 episodes where the Enterprise word is relevant. The opening, and then there's one where it docks and they mention it or something. But other than that, it's on a space station. There's no Enterprise. There's not even a ship that looks like the Enterprise for the majority of that thing. They realized, let's try something different, and it worked. But I think there is that reflex that you can't have, because the Titan's a cool looking ship. That's the other thing. It's a neat looking ship.
Great.
So I think they were just like, we need to have it called the Enterprise. We've got a good design. People are responding well. Let's just morph it into the Enterprise. And then we could just be like, yay, more Enterprise with the people you like. And that's a very shallow reaction, but it feels like one that an executive boardroom would make, to say, okay.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it's fully a decision that was made because they want to make another show. And they, for whatever, and maybe they just didn't have the confidence to think that like people could like watching a show that the ship that the characters are on is not called the Enterprise. We're hitting a point where we are starting to get through the majority of the alphabet with the Enterprise, and like at some point, like just name a ship a new name.
Yeah,
It's like that Fleet Museum was almost all Enterprises.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Someday I expect there will be a DVD or so, whatever, 4K extra where they will show the original ending that did not have the rechristening with the ship model and everything. And they will say, yeah, we shot two endings.
Yeah. Did Jack Crusher change his last name to Picard in that ending?
Jeez, I don't remember.
Didn't he say that? I could be wrong.
He may have, now that you say that.
I think he said something about like taking
Enterprise with a Picard on it or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, and I would like to see a show with those people because I think that, season problems aside, I like the guy in the Jack Crusher role. It felt like he was being set up to be exactly in a spinoff show. I mean, that felt like it almost from the beginning okay, we cannot put Patrick Stewart on another show. He's too old. We need somebody that's like him. So we want to set you up with a clone of him or whatever version of him.
But Jerry he doesn't play by the rules.
Right. Yes. So and I expect that to be one of these things where if there was a spinoff, that will be a constant. Well, your father learned that there's a reason for rules and there's a time for decorum, and you have to be able to rein yourself in, young Jack Picard.
Your father
Crusher,
was impulsive
whatever.
in his youth as well.
Yes. You want to get stabbed in the heart, kid?
Yep.
It's not fun. Right. Jerry Ryan's great as Seven. I love that she's a captain. I'm good with that. Geordie's daughter. I liked her. So the whole setup
her a lot.
Works great with a ship that looks good. Yes, it's stupid that they rechristened. I totally agree. But if that's the biggest problem a spinoff show would have at this point, then I'm going to let it go because I would like to see what they would do. But I really would like to see them stretch the concept a bit.
Yeah.
I always felt like Voyager didn't do enough with the whole we're separated from the Federation and what are we going to do about it type of thing. They played with it. They didn't really engage with it enough. Engage. There, Picard reference.
Right.
They didn't go far enough with it. So what I would love to see the Enterprise, is it G now? H? F? What are we on? Whatever it is.
This one was...
I think it's G. Is it G?
G? F,
no.
G.
G, yeah. I think it's G.
Or is it... I think it's G.
Yeah, I think it's the G. So, oh God, I just thought they would never do a promo where watch the crew hit the G spot with no, they won't. Could you imagine?
They made a big deal about what's Captain Seven's engage
her catchphrase. Yeah.
Catchphrase gonna be maybe it's gonna be hit the G spot.
Would that not be the best thing? Oh God! But hey, I actually was very happy with that level of restraint. I love the fact that they didn't have her do the catchphrase. That's save it and I do like whet the audience's appetite, make them demonstrate they want more, which I think is happening. It feels like it. And that's the way to do it.
Big time. Yep. I think most people came out of the finale begging for whatever this show is going to be.
Yeah. All right, so let's do some of our favorite things throughout the season, because I think there's a lot of moments I know, and I'll go first. When they do the whole thing inside of Data's mind, where he and Lore are going back and forth, and Lore appears to be completely consuming him, and Data is giving him all these memories, and it seems like Lore is taking them to destroy them, and then this turns out to be Data's way of basically defeating Lore. Because he says something along the lines of, you thought you were taking my memories and destroying them, but what you were actually doing was you were becoming more empathetic through the connection to these memories. You were becoming me. And so then he hugs him, and then he basically absorbs him, and then the old Data's back with some modifications. He's now a little bit more, he's using conjunctions and stuff like that. So I thought that was a beautiful resolution to, Data and Lore, the whole thing. I always liked it, but it has to have a logical endpoint. And when they were in the same body, you knew that's where they were going. And of course, we knew Data at the point of the show where we were. There's no way Data's getting killed again,
right?
And I was like, okay,
and
what
just
is this
letting it happen, I guess you've won.
Yeah, and that was the thing is they could have made it some stupid thing where they were literally physically punching each other, like the end of Metal Gear Solid 4, which is a game I love, but at the end it's just two guys punching each other. But that would have made no sense with the character. It would have been empty and boring and nothing. And instead, this felt like the most Data way to both defeat and become one with another version of himself. I thought it was beautifully done.
Yeah, it's certainly a high point of the series and a high point for the characters. And I think it is all, Data never wanted to defeat Lore. He always, throughout the series, rooted for... He didn't trust Lore, because Lore he's not stupid, but he had always rooted for Lore to change his ways and to be better. And in a weird way, he sort of achieves that by becoming one, in a weird way. And I like that, as Lore floats away, he's not angry. Like, Lore's not like, I'll get you next time, brother. Like, he's just like, he's accepting his fate, and they're hugging each other. It was very smartly written and performed and paced. It was really well done. And as the items are sort of each being presented, it's almost like a way of turning fan service into these, emotional moments, because they escalate, because it's like, oh, it's the pipe, the Sherlock Holmes pipe, and you can go like, oh, that's cool that's Data remembers that, and that's an important part of his journey. And the part that really got me was when it's the Tasha Yar hologram.
You know what's funny about that moment? That was my most dreaded, before I realized where it was going, thing, because I thought, oh no, when Laura goes to take her, Dave's going to say, you can't take the woman I love, and then they would just start slugging each other. I was like, oh no, this is where this is going to end up. And they didn't, which is, oh man, I wasn't sure where it was going at that point.
That's a moment where I kind of realized how much I trusted what the show was doing, because when I saw it, I thought, oh, that's cool. They got Tasha Yar into the show. That's a nice thing that they did. But I also, you realize quickly that it's not the final object. And what could be, like, I started getting a little choked up, because I knew what the next, like, if that's not the top object, the top memory, like, there's only one thing that is going to trump the Tasha Yar hologram, and it's going to be Spot. So as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, they got in a Spot cameo. Like, they found, like, a satisfying emotional way, a smart way to get Spot in this finale too. And so it was just so well done and so perfect.
Yeah, the Spot thing, I was the same way, because my animals are like my kids, so it's like I was having a hard time with that too, because I thought, oh man, you can't, even a representation of Spot, you can't kill this animal off. What are you doing here? Where's this guy? Like, please, come on. And then that's the whole way. You're right. The whole way it was handled was the perfect way that you can, again, resolve this thing, because it has always been the Data Lore thing. I mean, the other ones they mentioned, but they never really mattered. It was always going to be Data and Lore. You knew that was the two.
Yeah.
It was going to be those two, and it was going to be, how does Data beat Lore without compromising what makes Data Data? That was the thing, is, okay, what is the method? And the way of just establishing caring for Lore as opposed to his adversarial instinct.
Yeah.
Just perfectly done. Just excellent.
And it's another case of where I think what a lot of people really liked about this season was how much the actors felt like the characters. And this is a scene where, and it was the same in episode 7, especially 2, that you really got to see Brent Spiner play two very distinct characters, and it reminded you of, like, that I'm not just looking at Brent Spiner. I'm looking at Data, and I'm looking at lore, and I love the way he plays lore. And to see it again after so many years was neat to see him slip back into that character, because I feel like we've seen him slip into, we saw in season 1 him play Data again, and it was weird and it was tired, and somehow it's probably because he was playing this like awful CG deep-faked young Data when he is no longer young. But getting to play a sort of Data 2.0 who is now programmed to grow old, and it allowed him to play an evolved version of Data that feels like Data, and same with lore. So it was really nice to see. And then I wanted to point out too, I think one of the best things about this series was the revelation of that the Borg have been infecting us this whole time. That was a really amazing moment, and a really great, like, a Geordi, like, they're figuring it out, and Geordi turns and he's like, they've been assimilating us the whole time. And it was just so cool.
No, I agree. The way that was handled, it has the proper impact, because, and right away too, because part of it is the knowledge of, okay, that means once they're getting into it, you're like, oh, wait a minute. So Geordi's daughters are compromised. So once you knew what was going on, you had an understanding of, and how many people there are that the changelings have infiltrated through the transporter system, which everybody uses except for, McCoy and a couple of the stalwarts who are like, yeah, I'm not using that.
Yeah.
But, you right away know how bad that is for the Federation. Like, there's, and of course, the whole thing of the Borg and the changelings being together, when that's first propped up and you don't realize they're going to, shove it out of the back end, that feels like, okay, they have managed to take two enemies who we've seen be defeated before, especially the Borg, which I feel like and there's another reason I'm like, okay, they've really overused the Borg to the point where, as many people have pointed out, the Borg don't feel like that much of a threat most of the time anymore. They managed to, okay, well, you put the two of them together and it's peanut butter and chocolate, and now you're screwed, except peanut butter and chocolate, and it's going to be, deadly nightshade mushroom. So
yeah.
That's great.
And that idea of, an outside threat, that sudden revelation, because okay, there's a conspiracy. We know that there's changelings. There's probably, but how many could there be? There could maybe be a handful of changelings on some number of starships, but it's not like everybody's a changeling. It's like, this is a conspiracy, but this is a conspiracy that we can root out. To find out that the Borg, that the enemy is already behind the walls, that the outside threat has already invaded and you didn't know it, is like, the threat becomes an 11 out of 10 so fast. And it also ties everything, a lot of the mysteries of the season, of like, that I didn't think were particularly interesting. I didn't know why they would want to steal Picard's dead body. And because I couldn't really, I don't know, the way it was being presented, the clues that we were being given, I wasn't that engaged. Like, I'm like, I want to know, but what are they going to say that I'm going to be satisfied by? Like, what are they going to say that is actually going to interest me? And I didn't think that they were going to be able to do it, mostly because of seasons 1 and 2 and just sort of the current state of Hollywood writing. I didn't think they were going to give me an answer to that question that I thought was interesting and satisfying, and shockingly, they did, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think for me, I was thinking, okay, are we just going to have a de-aged Locutus again? Is that the
Right.
idea? Is this what we're going to be getting from this? Because again, you're right. There is a level of distrust that the first two Picard seasons and some of the modern Trek in general makes you go in and understandably, especially after Picard season 1 and 2, you sit there and go, yeah, they're going to botch this. Somehow this will get botched. Yeah, it feels great and the music's great and all the characters are good, but where is the screw up coming? It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because the mysteries have either been not great in the past or, well, I guess not great in general. They haven't resulted in much of anything. So there is that kind of, where are we going with this type of thing?
Mm-hmm.
I also I thought Riker's whole thing, Riker was great beginning to end. I mean, Riker didn't have a bad moment in the whole show.
No.
The thing with his son and the loss of his son, that plays so well into the part where they're stuck in the nebula. And, he basically is saying the whole time he's telling Picard he's wrong. And then finally he's like, yeah, you're right. He's like, I'm running from it. I don't know what to do with my grief. It's destroying not only me, but everybody around me. And then, him and Troy when they're back to like that, Riker's whole thing, man, that's somebody who watched the show and got what Riker is, because he never for 1 second was not excellent. And any time the camera was on him, I didn't really care who else was in there. And he was great. I mean, Frakes has been great the whole time. Good director, great actor. And once again, the anchor point, I think, of the show, honestly. I think he is the anchor of the show, not Picard.
Yeah.
It's Riker in this season, especially.
Yeah, I agree. I think everybody, that is just another general highlight, is how satisfying, like everybody had a reason to be there. Everybody had their moments to shine. Everybody got their, I don't know, even little bits of comedy and emotion. Like everybody got a little bit of everything. Everybody felt like they got a chance to play. We should point out one of the biggest character reveals would be the Enterprise D was a huge reveal, and very exciting. I had said before the season started that I thought the absolute best I could hope for is to see that crew standing on the bridge of a Galaxy-class starship. But I said, you can't do the Enterprise because the Enterprise D is gone. But there would still probably be a Galaxy-class ship or two floating around in the fleet that, maybe they end up like after a battle or, when the show's kind of wrapping itself up, they have to meet an admiral on the bridge of some ship and they let Picard, say engage one more time on a Galaxy-class ship or something. I never dreamed that we would get like the whole finale on the Enterprise D on a Galaxy-class ship. They fully rebuilt the bridge. I after the finale, I watched a lot of videos from the production designer, and it was a lot of people questioned whether or not it was enhanced with CG or if it was a virtual set. Like, how do they do it? They fully rebuilt the whole bridge. The what do you call it? The plaque on the bridge.
Oh, yeah.
That is the plaque from the old set. Somebody
Isn't
still
that
had
the only
it.
thing they had kept? Somebody had kept that. And
Someone had kept
things,
that.
yeah.
Yep. So that is that is cool to find out that is the original plaque, and it even got a little cameo. It got its moment to shine in the show. But I really love, and I liked the way that they lit, in this new Trek world of sort of dark lighting and sort of that cyberpunk influence in a lot of the visuals. It was nice to see an old Star Trek set with the lighting sort of reimagined a little bit to fit into that new Trek world a little bit more.
Yeah, I thought I did not expect the original ship to show up. I think that the reason given was great, that it would not be networked. So I'm like, that's perfect. That's all you need. We're good. And the fact that like you said, I would never. None of my guesses were that we would see the original Enterprise D put back together.
No.
And that they would be on it and flying it around. The only nitpick I have with it, and it is a minor one, but it's not practical, and you can tell it's not practical. It just doesn't. This is just a general thing. Models are better, and that's just my own thing.
No,
but
models
you can
are.
definitely tell that it's not an actual physical model. But honestly, do I care when I did not think you'd see this thing again? Not really. Nope.
No.
I don't care. You get to see it dodging in and out of a Borg cube, which we never got like this in the original show on Next Gen.
No.
For sure. So whatever. But that was great with the music swelling up and then taking it. I mean, you know, all that stuff works. It's full on nostalgia blast. It really doesn't matter.
Yep.
So that was great.
And they got Marjol Barrett's voice as the computer.
Yep.
Which is another huge, like when I heard that, because again, you're like, you see the ship, you're just like, oh my God, the ship's back. I'm not even thinking about it. As soon as the computer powers up and you hear the voice, I'm like, unbelievable, like that they did that. So cool.
Yep.
And I don't know if that was if it was pre-recorded stuff or if they AI did it, or they must have so many recordings of her doing computer stuff.
I'm sure that they probably computer stitched together what they needed. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I
would hope so.
Yeah, I would guess, because like you said, I'm sure for the show she recorded hundreds of lines that were never ever used, and you can just chop and move stuff around, and in the context of everything that's happening, you won't detect those cuts. They'll be perfectly fine, and you can cover them up with just a little bit of, you know, room tone. There's easy ways to do that type of stuff, so that was great.
Oh, yeah.
I also thought Rolaren was fantastically utilized. I think that whole thing that they did with her, again, a perfect way to have two people whose intense personal distrust is the reason that they know that neither of them is compromised. I didn't realize what was happening for a little bit there, because I'm like, what are they doing here? Like, I like Rolaren, don't get me wrong, she's great, but I'm like, what is the methodology behind this? Why is she suddenly in the show? And then when they get to that point where they are unloading on each other, to then get to the point where it's like, okay, changelings would never do this, therefore we are the only two people we can trust. And her death scene is good. She died giving them an escape route.
Yep. It is one of those things where overall, like, it's in the moment. I think overall I'm much happier with it. In the moment, it was are you really going to do this again? Where, like, I hate introducing a character and killing them off in the same episode. I get it more with this story that they're telling. But in the moment I was like, oh, come on. Like, she couldn't have, you know, been along for the ride for one more episode, something, like, figured out. But in the context of now that we see the whole series, now that we know what she was doing, I'm much happier with it.
Well, also in the moment, I thought there was going to be another character death from the main roster. So then it would have been like, oh, we're killing two people off. So I was the same way. When that happened, I was like, oh, she couldn't have beamed out. They couldn't have gotten her out, something.
Yeah.
But that was because I was like, well, we're already going to lose somebody, which I thought at the time was going to be Riker or Worf. I'm like, this is where it's going. It's going to be Riker dying to save Picard, or it's going to be Worf dying to save anybody. Yeah. Because he would do that for everybody. So I'm like, we're going to have two of these people die? But yeah, at the end, I'm like, okay, it's a fitting way for that character to go out as well. And I like it. And then the last thing, to mention Worf. Worf's great. Again, like Riker, Worf is fantastic the whole way, but the best thing with him is when they're in the cube and it's him, Riker, and Picard, and they're going to separate. And Picard's like, all right, you can't come with me. And Worf says something like, there's only two words that Klingons don't know or say. I don't remember what the first one, I think it's surrender or defeat, and then farewell. And it's this beautiful little, because I always have liked, there's not a lot of them, but I always have loved these little interactions we get from time to time with Picard and Worf, because there aren't a ton of them. The other good one is in First Contact, where he calls him a coward. Mm-hmm. And Worf's like, if you were anybody else, you'd be dead before you hit the ground, or I'd kill you where you stand.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he's like, listen, I'm sorry. You're the bravest person. It's beautiful. And with Worf, it's always understated, because Worf doesn't do big emotions. And then Worf trumps even that, where at the very end, Raffi gets this video from her kid, And you find out that Worf is the one who sent it. And he says, well, somebody, I guess, must have sent this thing, and, so that they would understand that you're rolling everything, even though you're supposed to be clandestine. And she hugs him. And honestly, that's the kind of stuff, I'll eat that stuff up all day long. And for it to be Worf, because again, Worf is not that way. He's very understated. He's very reserved.
Yeah.
So you're used to the stoic warrior. That's his thing. And that's what makes all the better the moments where he's not that, where he says something that's funny. Which is usually not him making a joke. He's saying something that others find funny, not because he is trying to be funny. Or these emotional moments where he's not going to tell Picard, he's not going to give Picard a hug and say it was, serving under you was the highlight of my life, Admiral. No, that's not going to happen. That's not Worf. But instead he does it the way Worf does it.
Yeah, he says, nope, I'm with you to the end.
Right. It's great. Just great.
No, that was like them in the Borg cube is what it is, but that moment where they're just like, no, you're not going alone. Like that felt really good, and in a way, it made me feel better because it made me feel like they're not going to kill all of these people. It made me feel a little more safe that I wasn't about to watch one of these people die. They could have still killed somebody. But for some reason, like, when a character goes off, when a character's like, nope, I'm doing this by myself, you always get that feeling like this is the last time these people will see each other. And they were doing that a lot in the finale. There was so many like, well, we got to go beam down, like characters giving each other looks like this is the last time I'm going to see you. Not saying anything, just kind of like having those moments. And it's so satisfying to like have a writer who has who can be ballsy enough to set up those moments and then rip the rug out from under us in a good way and like really set us up like these characters believe they're going to die. And if they believe it, we assume we're being told this information as the audience because it's about to happen, because they want an emotional response from the audience. And to set it up and to not have it happen is an even better payoff. Some people would maybe say it's like it's not a payoff if you don't go through with it. I think it's an even better payoff. It makes them when they reunite so much more satisfying and so fun. It'd be like, I mean, I guess I've heard the rumors about the new Indiana Jones, if Indy's gonna die in this one. But it's like, I wouldn't enjoy The Last Crusade more if Indiana Jones died at the end. I feel like I wouldn't be more emotional. I just feel like it's such an easy thing for Hollywood to do, and I'm so pleasantly surprised when they don't go that route.
Yeah, it tends to be used as a shortcut to force an emotion, as opposed to because I'm the same way. It's to me, whether the new Indiana Jones, I don't know if it's going to be any good or not, but I don't need to see the end of every single character's story. I am okay with not knowing the beginning of every character's story, nor the end. I'm fine being in the middle when they're in their prime. And now, that's not to say you can't do it. Logan is a great film. That's a great film of a character's ending. That I'm fine with it. I think it fits the character. It's a wonderfully done movie that honestly I would never have guessed would ever have been made. If you told me that Logan was going to be made the way it was with Wolverine's death, I would have said, yeah, no way. Hollywood will keep that character alive forever. You're never going to see him die.
Right.
And sure enough, they did a great movie that showed his end. And Professor, I mean, really, that movie is astonishing. So we could talk about that all day too.
But even with that, now Hugh Jackman is coming back as Wolverine. So it's you don't even have to follow your own rules anymore.
Well, you don't, but of course Deadpool doesn't have any rules, so that'll
correct.
Be,
well, and that's also having it be Logan when he's older. you've still got some stories to tell in between
Sure.
if you really wanted to.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah. No, there's narrative room, but that's exactly the point. Is the quick shot is to just kill off the characters so that everybody cries at the end. Everybody's emotional. It's like it doesn't have to always be that way. Characters can sail off into the sunset and you never have to see them again. And you can imagine, yes, of course they won't live forever, but we don't need. It's the same kind of problem that many stories run into. Is when you tell too much of a story, you start sapping of its quality. Stories can just exist in a certain moment of time, and you don't need everything before it and everything after it.
Yeah.
And the Indiana Jones movies, I'm sticking with that original trilogy. I really don't care what else they do. It's fine.
No, I still to this day say that there are 3 Indiana Jones movies. Like I just don't even acknowledge. I'm at a point where I'm not mad when they make bad movies. I just ignore them. I don't need them. I have the good ones. That's all I need. And I don't care if they don't make more good ones, and I don't care if other people like the ones that I think are bad. Like it doesn't matter. But
yes. I'm in the same boat. People can enjoy whatever they want. So there are people who tell me, honestly, I think that they enjoy the Star Wars prequels. You know what? I can't ever put myself into that mental space. Can't do it. But if those people enjoy them, I don't want everybody to like everything that I like. That's perfect. That's a bad system to be in. So it's fine that there's a variety, and good. You know, people can listen. People, I may have brought this up in the last time we talked. People tell me Napoleon Dynamite's a funny movie. Okay. I'm sure they're being honest when they tell me that. I'm sorry, I'm never going to believe them because I can't make it through the first 20 minutes of it. So that's fine, though, because I've seen comments on movies where they say that people who I think are some of the funniest beings walking the planet are, quote, not funny. Okay. I believe that those people don't think they're funny. I don't think they're wrong in what they believe. I think they're wrong objectively, but that's a separate issue, and that's okay.
Right.
I don't have to tell them. They don't have to follow what I think. I know I'm right, and they think they're right, so that's fine.
Yep.
We don't have to come to blows over it. And that's great. The art should be a variety of things for everybody to enjoy in different ways, because you can have 2 people who like 2 different things for wildly different reasons that at some point can create something new together that satisfies both audiences. Or they just stay on the sides of the fence they're on and make the stuff that those people like. I haven't watched a Kevin Smith movie since Clerks 2 that I didn't think was probably best left unmade. But there is a fan base for his movies that shows up every time and thinks they're great. Good. I am happy those people have somebody that keeps making stuff they want to consume. Everybody should have somebody like that, where there's an artist or a musician or a whatever that keeps doing things and never disappoints you, because we got way too many people who end up disappointed on the long enough time scale. So if you find an artist or a creator that makes the stuff that you like forever, be thankful. There aren't that many of them around.
Yeah. Have I told you that I'm in Jersey Girl?
Oh, are you? No, you didn't tell me that. No.
Okay. I'm an extra in Jersey Girl. There's a scene where they perform Sweeney Todd in a children's talent show.
Yeah, I didn't think I should say I didn't think Jersey Girl was bad. I just didn't love it. So it's not like I'm saying every movie I think's bad.
I'm in the same boat. But Kevin Smith put out on his website, a call for extras for this scene, and I put in my name, and all you had to do was be at a place at a time, and you could be in the in the audience of the auditorium, and it was a lot of fun, I have to say. It's you always know that a film set is a very slow moving thing, and you have to get this angle, film it this way, and then all of the lighting has to change to move the camera, swing it a few feet around and get a different angle. It's a slow process. I never imagined how slow until I watched it happen. I think I sat in that auditorium for I forget if it was 8 hours or 10 hours. And, they got maybe 5 shots, 6 shots done in that time. It was shocking.
95% setup, 5% action.
Yeah, it was just crazy. But it was fun. We got to, Kevin Smith came out and he's like, okay, so in this movie, it's Ben Affleck and his little daughter and their friends they're going to do a number from Sweeney Todd in the school talent show. So what you're looking at, what you're supposed to be reacting to, the actors are going to perform it for you first. So I got to watch Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler and George Carlin and Stephen Root and Michael Starr perform a number from Sweeney Todd, to a children's school auditorium to a couple hundred people, which is kind of a once in a lifetime, like, neat thing to get to experience. But if you watch, I guess I don't know if this is in the widescreen. It might only be in the 4:3, the VHS copy, but because I'm way in the back, and I thought, like, no one's ever gonna see me in the back. There's a part where we do a standing ovation, and they're like, okay, a slow clap is gonna start, and they've got kind of people in the audience who have practiced, like, when they're gonna stand up. So when those people stand up, the people around them should stand up, and the standing ovation is going to move back through the crowd like a wave from front to back. And I said, okay, here's my plan. I'm just going to stand up right away. So you will see one guy in the back stand up way before everybody else stands up. That's me. And I'm blurry in the background, but I'm wearing a light gray. It was a hoodie. I don't even know if it's, like, in focus enough to see that it's a hoodie, but you can see a guy way in the back in, like, a light gray top stand up way before everybody else does. That's me.
I've got the YouTube clip, so I'm trying to scrub through it because I'm kind of curious where's the ovation part. There's somebody. Oh, wait. Okay, hold on. Okay, there's everybody.
I'd be like way off to the left.
Okay.
I was like the back
I'm
left
watching
corner.
it now, so they're bowing, and some people are clapping up front. So I'm waiting to see if it. Hold on. Okay, wait. I think. Oh, man, the way the cut is everybody's kind of standing already. So hold on. I'm scrubbing. This is wonderful for audio listeners. I know. Okay, that could be you because I see a gray blob with a face on it. So that's possible.
That was probably me.
Left. Yeah, that's probably it because you were up before a lot of the people in the back. So
yeah, I remember I could see it because I did go see it in the theater because I wanted to see the movie.
I mean, I'm also looking at it on YouTube and probably not the best quality. So it's
Yeah, but
that looks like what you're talking about because there's one person that looks like a gray blob with a face.
Yep.
Which again, on a Blu-ray or whatever, I'm sure I could see.
Yeah, and it is. I should say, like, I mean, the back of the auditorium is very dark. Yes.
But the gray helps with that because you can see a gray thing shape come up.
Right.
Michael Myers-esque from the back.
Well, what's funny is they because of secrecy or whatever, it's like they didn't even tell us what to wear, and I was kind of irritated by that because I was like, I would have worn something a little nicer, like if you had told me I was going to, like, in theory I'm supposed to be like a parent or a sibling or something of a child that's in this talent show. I would have sure, like, dressed up slightly and not been incredibly scrubby. Right. But they didn't say anything. So
yeah.
And I dipped out before because I had to drive back from New Jersey to Minnesota. So I had a 26-hour drive in front of me as soon as I left. So I dipped out before I think they broke for a meal or something after an incredibly long time, and I just left. So I didn't. It was before they had everybody sign the non-disclosure agreements. So technically, I guess I was free to like spill any beans about the plot of Jersey Girl as I wanted to, because legally I didn't sign anything. But I don't think too many people were chomping at the bit to find out the plot to Kevin Smith's new romantic comedy.
Yeah,
because it was also being marketed as like a Ben Affleck J-Lo romantic movie, like that. More It was more Kevin Smith. Like if you watch the trailer, you would get the feeling that it was not very in line with Kevin Smith's sense of humor. But to watch the movie, it is much more of a Kevin Smith movie than it would appear to be.
Yeah, the marketing was strange around it. Yeah, it was almost try to get people to forget that he made other movies. It was weird. I remember it was marketed very. I mean, I think it probably was more to capitalize on Affleck and J-Lo, and they wanted to play up the that,
right,
as opposed to from the guy who brought you Mallrats type of thing.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
but not a bad movie, not a terrible movie.
No.
Before the. I mean, it was probably in the slow decline. Although I'll say I think Clerks 2 is a step up. It's not like they were just downhill ever since Jersey Girl.
Yeah, I often feel like Kevin Smith's thing is if somebody else directed his stuff, it'd probably be, if somebody else was allowed to clean his work up a little bit and direct, I think his stuff would be much, much better. That's just my gut feeling. It's kind of like Lucas getting total control of the prequels. Nobody said no.
Right.
They said no. Why would you do this? No. Or can we just clean this dialogue up, George? Teenagers don't talk to each other like George. But no, nobody could say no. So he's like, it's this crazy stuff. And so you sit there and go, the prequels have good ideas. And again, if you like them, I'm not, fine. But to me, the biggest failing of the prequels is that there is a benefit to somebody being like, let's sit down and discuss this scene for just a few minutes, because these are human beings talking to each other, not androids that have been programmed by somebody who wasn't paying attention to the code, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you want, George. All right. So, but that's whatever. We're not going to get into that.
No. But in any case, we should probably wrap it up. But
we're hitting the 2-hour mark. So
in general, I think we can say Season 3 Picard, far more bright spots than nitpicks. And I mean, I think aside from the changeling menace being completely irrelevant going into the finale, I don't think there's anything beyond just minor nitpicks. Very satisfying season. And for as much as I complain about mystery boxes, I think this season, in a way, proved me wrong, because once those mystery boxes were opened and we were shown what was in them, I was happy with what was in them and I was satisfied. So it was maybe the best example of a successful mystery box story in modern Hollywood screenwriting. I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think, especially in light of the first 2 seasons, but also just as a nice additional finale to TNG, which, let's be fair, TNG also had a storyline where there was a man whose body was exploded and had bugs coming out, and then that got dropped the next season.
Yep.
So it's not as if they've not had villains before that seemed like they were going to be a big deal and got vanished. So maybe in that way it was also an homage, although I don't think it was intentional.
No.
But as an attempt to bring back TNG for one last ride, or whatever terrible terminology, cliched thing you want to say.
Yep.
I think that it was far more, and I'd rather it end that way than start off and then blow it. So if it had to be
true.
2 bad seasons and a great finale, take that order. I also look forward to somebody fan editing this down to a tighter pace, because I think this really should have been 6 episodes.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is they probably said we're going to have to make 10 of these, and that probably contributed a little bit. But all that aside, I think it does exactly what it needs to do in terms of it's got a hook of a couple first episodes that make you stick with it through the slower parts, and then it ends just about as perfectly as you could really expect it to, and exceeds that expectation based on the first 2 train wreck seasons.
Yes.
So leave it alone now, Paramount. You've done it. TNG is done. You even redid the card scene and made it seem not hokey, so let's just leave it alone now and put that to bed. You managed the impossible feat after basically falling down a long flight of stairs twice. You managed to construct an elevator that got to the top of the building. Stop there and don't try to skydive off it now. Just leave it.
Yep. And that was one thing that we didn't bring up too, that I want to wrap in. Now of course, Walter Koenig's cameo.
Yeah.
Because what I feel very strongly about the finale was, it was not just a one last ride for TNG. It felt like a one last ride for old Trek. And I don't have I don't like Discovery, but I like Lower Decks. I like Strange New Worlds. I don't think Trek in general is going in a bad direction, but I do think that there is an old Trek and a new Trek. And this season did feel with, involving Voyager characters, with involving DS9 enemies, with obviously TNG, and then also getting in an original series cast member who was playing a character named after the actor who played Chekhov in the movies. Like, they were wrapping in, JJ verse references with old, with original. It just felt like, in a lot of ways, this was like them saying, this is us taking old Trek on one last big ride. And I think that's okay. I think you should move forward. And I do think the whatever the legacy show is a good way to do that. It's kind of a have your cake and eat it too. You can move forward in a new Trek style with some goodwill that you built during this old Trek ride. I mean, which is kind of what, in some ways, what like the bridge, the movies that were, a Star Trek 6 was the last original series, original cast movie, and that was filmed at a time. I mean, they filmed that using next gen sets. They filmed that, Worf, Michael Dorn is in that as Worf's grandfather. They sort of moved into the next thing with a little bit of goodwill from the old thing, and I think that's a smart way for legacy to be the bridge. But I also think that this was a really nice way of saying, like, hey, everybody that's 40 right now or 50 that loved Star Trek in the 80s and 90s, it's like, this one's for you. And like, let's go out with a bang and let's do it right. And I think they did.
Six is a good mirror as well, because I felt like that was supposed to be setting up Chekhov running the Excelsior in a couple movies. Never happened, but
yeah,
which is a true crime that would never be rectified. But yeah, I think we're largely in the same place. This was a surprisingly excellent way of wrapping up a certain era of Star Trek, and with hopefully, I will be very curious if they do make this new show with the same basic people. I would be curious what that will look like. I hope it would be the same rough balance of what this show was, where it was trying to do a lot of things at once and largely managed it. So
yeah,
we'll see.
Yep, we'll see.
I'm sure they'll announce it with 30 other projects at the next Star Trek Day or whatever it is. So
yep.
Well, Brian, thank you for coming on again. This was another excellent couple. I'm going to release this as one episode. I'm just going to do a supersized episode. I'm not going to bother chopping this one up because we never took a break anyway, so it's perfectly fine. So again, you can find Brian's work over at youtube.com/HatHoleHomeVideo. I know you've got some stuff that's in the works.
I'll tell you a secret that
the
next video, which is very ambitious, is kind of more of the way I'm sort of selling it to myself is It's a movie review show that is heavily inspired by things like Pee-wee's Playhouse and Beakman's World, trying to make it a much bigger thing than just a movie review. And the movie that I'm reviewing in this next episode is Star Trek First Contact. So there you go.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, that would be lauded as good market brand cross synergy promotion. So that's fantastic. Well, yeah, that's great. Because I was going to say, is there anything you want to promo? We've done that. So, we'll probably do more of these as there's more Star Trek.
Yes.
I'm always going to be happy to talk about it. So, or some kind of weird other new thing. So
me too.
All right. Well, again, go over to Brian's YouTube channel because it's fantastic. And, colorful, wonderful movie reviews of mostly movies that I totally agree with your takes on. That's what I like about it. I'm like, yeah, this is stuff that people tend to forget about. The Monkey Bone review was great. The Toys review was great. It's, so all I could say is that I wouldn't have him on here if I didn't like his stuff. I don't generally bring on people I don't like. So this is a logic sort of follows if you go with it.
Although that might be kind of interesting. Start bringing on people, say like, what you do on YouTube is trash.
Yeah. There's enough negativity on the internet. I'm not sure that I need to contribute more. So
that's true.
Even though it's often rewarded, I think that's a negative thing, and I'm not gonna. I'm gonna try to steer clear of that as much as I can. But I always did like the old Robert Morton Downey Jr. show. I always loved that show. So maybe someday, if I ever get ambitious, I'll be like, let me bring somebody on, just scream at him from a podium because, why not? I'd have to take up smoking, though, and I ain't doing that. Could always fake it. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now because this is a rambling outro, which has no end point if I just keep going with this. So, Brian, thanks again for coming on. It was a blast. And, yeah, everybody else go subscribe to his YouTube channel and watch his stuff because it's fun. And watch Picard Season 3, especially if you gave up, which I did initially. If you gave up on it, you owe yourself a watch of this because it really is so much of an improved Enterprise. I was about to say that. It's so much of an improved attempt to give us a little bit more TNG, and there was so much success in it that unlike those other two seasons, you're probably going to come out at the other side and be happy with what you saw and get to see some new stuff from people that we grew up, a lot of us loving and liking their stuff. So season 3 is worth seeing. And on that note, I have nothing left to say. So I'm going to say thank you very much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Visit OzoneNightmare.com to subscribe to new episodes or to browse through our back catalog. Follow @Ozone Nightmare on Twitter for the latest episode postings and other show information. If 140 characters just isn't enough, you can always email us, theozonenightmare@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, visit our creator page at patreon.com/Ozone Nightmare. Music for Ozone Late Night is provided by Ogre. Visit ogresound.bandcamp.com to listen and purchase his fantastic selection of music.